If your hate could be turned into electricity, it would light up the whole world. In the grim darkness of the far future, every tool must be used. The Astra Militarum employs the lasgun in its billions. The Imperial Navy voyages through the voids of the galaxy, employing tools of staggering potency, and the Ecclesiarchy sallies forth into battle with a faith so great that miracles are becoming more common by the day. Nevertheless, some of the most ancient weapons that humanity has ever fielded still find a place on the fields of battle in some form or another. One might think that in a galaxy where a sniper's bullet can drop a man from over a mile away, a sorcerer can send a tank flying with a thought, or a giant walking robot can eradicate cities from the face of a planet, a sword, spear, or axe would be next to useless in combat. However, the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, make use of these tools of war in an altogether distinct way. Combining the weapons of mankind's infancy on Terra with the frighteningly powerful disruptor field technology of the 41st millennium, the Astartes have been equipped with an array of fearsome armaments that became known colloquially as power weapons. These new takes on old classics can flare to life at the touch of an activation stud, sheathing the offensive portion of the weapon in a halo of blue-white electricity. They are the last word in defeating heavy armor, short of the mighty melter gun, and many see a place of veneration in a chapter's armory or store of relics. The Power Sword is, without doubt, the most iconic member of the power weapon family. Typically reserved for ranking members of the Adeptus Astartes, these elegant blades are well known for their great versatility, being able to answer more threats than nearly any other power weapon. Notable examples of this class of power weapon include the Black Sword, Ultramarines Honor Blades, the Dark Angel's Needle of Truth, and the Deathwatch's Shard of Berkin. Blessed by the fanatical devout chaplains of the Black Templars, and paired with the Armor of Faith, this lusterless black blade is capable of rending steel and stone as easily as the joints and sinew of the enemies of mankind. When the original Black Sword was gifted to the then first captain of the Imperial Fist's Legion, Sigismund, its deathly aura left the indomitable warrior in a trance-like state and enabled his newly found murderous mood, as seen in Warhawk.
I have been seeking you for some time, First Captain. I am Khalid Hassan, chosen of the Sigillite, operating on my master's behalf. This will take but a moment.
He gestured, and one of his soldiers brought up a weapon. The trooper held it two-handed, cumbersomely, barely able to keep it aloft, despite wearing what looked like to be a kind of power armor. It was a sword, still in its scabbard, far too large for a baseline human to ever wield. As soon as Sigismund laid eyes on it, a faint shiver passed through his body. He almost thought he had heard something emanate from it, a faint murmuring, unquiet and veiled. The body language of the man who held it up gave away what he thought of it. He was desperate to be shot of it.
What is that?
A gift from my master's own repository, forged a long time ago, when the world was a different place.
Sigismund found it hard to take his eyes off the blade. He could sense immediately, even before it was drawn, that it was made beautifully. Everything about it, its size, its profile, the fine gold and black decoration that ran from tip to guard, screamed of excess, of extremity.
I have a blade.
You do have a blade. This is the blade.
Then give it to someone who wants it.
It is for you.
Says who?
The Emperor.
Sigismund found himself gazing at the black hilt. He had to make an effort not to reach out and seize it. The damned thing was seducing him. A mingled sense of revulsion and awe froze him in place.
He speaks not.
You truly believe that? The sword is yours. It has always been yours. The hour is come. Take it.
As if in some kind of trance, almost without meaning to, Sigismund did so. As he grasped the hilt, a shiver ran up his arm. He took the rim of the scabbard and drew the blade smoothly. The metal was black as jet, hardly reflecting the lumens. He lifted it to his face and saw nothing. The surface drank in light, giving nothing back. It was selfish, this thing.
Why me?
He asked almost for the sake of form. Now that he had it in his hands, he sensed the truth of it all.
My orders were simply to deliver it.
Sigismund angled it, turned it, switched it to horizontal, and looked down the blade's length. Heavy, far heavier than any sword he had borne before, but something had told him it wouldn't slow him down. Its weight was just another aspect of its savage nature. The murmuring carried on, just beyond the edge of hearing, almost intelligible as he swiped in practice arcs. It might have been his imagination. It wasn't his imagination.
It has been here all this time.
Many ancient things are guarded in my master's chambers.
No, you do not understand me. When we went into the void, preaching the end of magic, this thing was already here. It had already been made by him. What does that tell you?
I'm not minded to speculate.
Sigismund laughed. With a deft movement, he unchained his old blade and handed it off. Then, he shackled the black sword's grip and locked the scabbard at his belt.
Well, you are fortunate that it pleases me. Give my thanks to your master and tell him that it suits my new mood.
I will. And what mood would that be, Captain?
Sigismund moved past him. He could smell promethium even before he crossed the threshold.
Murderous.
In the hands of the first Black Templar, Sigismund, the Black Blade was a true weapon of mass destruction, felling Chaos Champions and Xenos Warlords without number. The Honor Blades of the Ultramarines are presented to Chapter Champions, Space Marines that have been elevated to a Chapter's Honor Guard due to their bravery on the battlefield and their skill at arm. Often these Marines are tasked with protecting their Chapter Master and will challenge enemy leaders in single combat should the opportunity arise. The Honor Blades that are given come as a set of 2 power swords, a broadsword and a poniard. This perfect pairing of attack and defense allows for easy parries and devastating ripostes. The Needle of Truth is an ancient blade that was used by the Dark Angel interrogator chaplains in the Jericho Reach sector. The chaplains of the Dark Angels have gained a reputation of being even more horrifying than the corrupted Marines they are tasked with extracting information from. The blade itself is known to affect both heretics and demons alike, breaking their will to fight and making them more apt to cooperate with the wielder. So long as their sight remains fixed on this terrible weapon, they shall know fear. The expert alien hunters of the Deathwatch keep a vast store of power weapons at their disposal, and among them is the Shard of Berkin. During a titanic battle against the Tyranid Hive Fleet codenamed Dagon, a fearless battle brother of the Blood Angels chapter made the ultimate sacrifice to defeat a Hive Tyrant in the service of the Deathwatch. Though his blade was cleft in twain by the beast, it was recovered and returned to the Watch Fortress armories, where it remains to this day, humming with electrical power that has lost none of its potency, despite only being half the blade it once was. It is said that those who look upon its edge will feel the power of the one who once used it. The blade has since become a relic of the Deathwatch in the Jericho Reach, and has been used as both a weapon and an icon of valor and encouragement against the Tyranid menace. Also gracing the armories of the Deathwatch is the Thief of Secrets. The sword is possessed of a machine spirit whose thirst for knowledge is so great that the sword itself has developed power field settings for countless alien species. No blade will have an easier time piercing chitinous plate, exploding internal organs, or burning out alien nervous systems. More brutal than a power sword, but also being less nimble, power axes often see use with a combat shield to make up for their inferior defensive capabilities. While less elegant and civilized as its power sword cousin, the choice to bring a power axe into battle is often more of a personal statement than a strategic choice. Notable examples of this brutal tool of war include the Headsman and the Hunter, the Axe Mortalis and the Legatine Axe. When you think of the Imperial Fists, the sons of Rogel Dorn, you will most likely think of how they are, in general, disciplined, methodical, and straight-laced to a fault. Fortification and defenses are their arenas, and shooting is their forte. Not so for Fafnir Ran. This native of Dorn's home of Inwit was perhaps the most aggressive and bellicose Imperial Fist of his era, barring, perhaps, the mighty Sigismund. Backed by his fury, Fafnir Ran achieved the coveted rank of Lord Seneschal and captain of his legion's first assault cadre. At his side at all times were his twin power axes, the Headsman and the Hunter. These mighty axes were used in tandem with a boarding shield in an altogether unorthodox, yet devastatingly potent fighting style that spelled doom for all that crossed his path. With such weapons and skill at his disposal, it is no wonder Fafnir Ran earned the moniker Dorn's Executioner, and would go on to be the founding chapter master of the Executioner's chapter. Having made its home in the hand of Dante, the chapter master of the Blood Angels, the Axe Mortalis has slain Xenos, mutants, and heretics beyond count. Many say that Dante may be the oldest living space marine, but the Axe Mortalis dates back to the seminal days of the Imperium of Man, being forged by the chapter armorer Matriculus soon after the Horus Heresy. It is also said to carry the death blessing of the Primarch Sanguinius, according to chapter lore. The Legatine Axe was a unique model created to the exacting standards of Rabute Guilliman himself, after he had performed a thorough examination of thousands of power weapon designs. Taking all of the best aspects of these designs, the forgers of the Mechanicum produced a perfectly balanced instrument of war. While it lacked the more exotic looks and capabilities of the most specialized Astartes gear, no other weapon performed in such a balanced manner in so many different scenarios. A weapon more often seen in the hands of the Eldar, power spears and power lances have been adopted by select members of the Adeptus Astartes as well. By installing a power blade at the end of a long shaft, a Marine will enjoy a much greater reach advantage than the average rank and file. Notable examples of power spears and lances include the White Scar's Power Lance, the Black Spear, and the Storm Warden's Skybolt. The power lance that the White Scars employ has become so popular among their ranks that it has come to be known as the chapter's signature weapon. Whether it be from on foot or from the back of a scout bike, these deadly lances allow their users to strike whilst being unable to be struck back at, and laugh as their enemies die around them. Bearing a suspicious resemblance to the colossal Guardian Spears of the Adeptus Custodes, the Black Spear's true origins are utterly unknown to all except perhaps select members of the High Lords of Terror and its owner, Asterion Malok, who whilst wielding this one-of-a-kind weapon, stared down a Custodian shield captain. A Custodian shield captain who, in that moment, seeing that impossibly severe warrior wielding that inconceivable weapon, could not say with any certainty if Asterion Malok was a warrior he could hope to best, as seen in Regent's Shadow.
He carried a power spear of a similar pattern to ours, though it was darker and older than any I had borne. His red cloak hung like molten lead across his angular shoulders, and he carried a circular shield with symbols engraved on it that I could not decipher. I watched him approach, trying to ascertain some weakness, some flaw that I could use against him. I detected nothing. He may as well have been an automaton, a battle creation forged in some dark and forgotten laboratory and sent into the world of the living. Who could have halted such a monster? Valoris in all probability, Guilliman without a doubt. Beyond that, and as for myself, I felt no certainty. I took a step forward, moving between Malok and Fadix, angling the tip of my spear towards the oncoming chapter master. "No further," I commanded, gripping my spear tight. He kept coming. He carried his spear formally, as if it were some kind of sacrificial totem, a curse-warded instrument for the ritual killing of beasts. The lenses in his archaic helm were black, and to look into them felt like looking into the void itself. There was a swagger in his every movement, a rolling, baleful demonstration of pure contempt. "No further," I warned again, tensing to strike. The moment he took a step onto the podium stairs, I would move. To this day, I do not know what would have happened if he had done so.
It is a weapon of devastating potency, able to even part the stalwart hide of Terminator plate. If needed, the chapter master of the Minotaurs may also use the spear's incorporated laser weapon, the power of which is said to be equal to that of anti-tank weaponry. The Skybolt is a departure from the norm of the Storm Warden's home planet. While the majority of warriors prefer the Sacris Claymore, the Skybolt is a heavy spear intended to be used with a shield. This chapter relic was fashioned for a chapter master whose name has been long lost to history. Though his name may have been forgotten, the Skybolt remains a symbol of skill and dedication to one's craft. While Astartes' knives are said to be the length of a sword for a mortal, and Astartes' swords often stand as tall as a mortal man, the power Claymore stands nearly as tall as an average Astartes warrior, requiring an Astartes to wield it with 2 hands. This massive blade excels in an open field where its wielder can make use of wide, sweeping strikes to cleave apart multiple targets at once. Woe unto any marine foolish enough to take this blade into tight quarters, for this blade's length will surely be his undoing. A notable example of a power claymore would be Morwenna, the blade of the Watch Captain Brand. He and his power claymore have reaped an enormous harvest of Xenos blood over their years of service. Measuring in at 2 full meters in length, just over 6.5 feet, Morwenna has never left its Watch Captain's side over his 9 vigils. Despite its status as a chapter relic of the Storm Wardens, Brand is actively looking for a worthy recipient to wield it in his stead, feeling that it would serve the Imperium better in the hands of one not bound to the duties of a Watch Captain. With the striking power of an axe and the finesse of a sword, the Power Falchion is a heavy, single-bladed weapon that has found common use amongst the battle brothers of the White Scars. The Power Falchion's unique geometry makes it suited for devastating chopping swings, and most fencers of the Space Marines will probably look elsewhere for a blade if they employ a style that relies on finesse. For those that prefer a more direct approach, the Power Falchion will reward them with the ability to defeat armor and remove limbs with ease. A notable example of a Power Falchion would be the Corroded Falchion, a mainstay of the armory of the Death Watch. For many centuries, this ornate blade was once wielded in defiance of High Fleet Dagon. At some point during the campaign, it was used to battle a toxic Venomthrope. Though the monster was eventually slain, its bioacid blood had soaked the blade and permeated within it to a molecular level, gradually weakening its structure. Despite the chapter's artificer's best efforts, the corrosion could not be halted. Not wishing to lose this priceless relic to a Xenos' parting shot, the artificers constructed a sheath that contained the blade in a stasis field. So long as it remains undrawn, only on rare occasions is this Power Falchion brought to the battlefield. But reports have surfaced that claim the ingrained bioacid has caused near instant devastating damage to its foes. Only time will tell whether the Corroded Falchion will remain intact to slay another enemy, or betray its wielder in his time of greatest need and collapse into useless shards. There comes a time in an Astartes' career where he must play the Executioner. In these times, he may call upon the fearsome power of the Executioner Axe. This large, heavy-bladed axe must be wielded with 2 hands to be of any use for the man that bears it, and often they are of mastercrafted quality. Within the armories of the Death Watch, there is a set of only 12 of these mastercrafted instruments of death. Precious little is known about them, but what is known is that they are only issued to those that have gained a Watch Commander's absolute trust. While the name Chain Fist may lead some to believe that this weapon is primarily a glove with a chainsaw integrated into it, a more accurate description would be that the Chain Fist is a power glove with an incorporated chain sword. Upon activation, the teeth of the Chain Fist grant shape to a destructive electrical field, and the weapon inflicts a devastating burst of energy with each instance of tooth contact. Afterwards, the whirring teeth remove the shattered or molten material with relative ease. While effective in the extreme, the Chain Fist's immense weight makes it unsuitable for most Astartes warriors. Terminator Battleplate, however, bears no such restrictions. Many are the tales of battle brothers in Terminator armor cutting through boarding shields, Voidcraft bulkheads, and even heavy vehicles and dreadnoughts with their Chain Fists. The most notable example of this kind of weapon would most certainly be those wielded by the mysterious chapter master of the Carcharodons, Tyberos, the Red Wake, and his weapons Hunger and Slake. Hunger and Slake are a pair of massive chain fists of unknown origin that were at some point combined with a set of lightning claws. The chapter master of the Space Sharks has been seen putting them to great use during both the Badab War and several engagements against the Tyranids. Lightning claws are not a weapon that should be taken lightly by their enemies. or their users. Demanding rigorous training and the willingness to sacrifice access to ranged weaponry, these heavy gauntlets sport 4 individual power blades that extend like the talons of a bird of prey from the back of each gauntlet. When used by one such as a senior assault specialist, these electrical blades can turn the wielder from a normal space marine into a whirlwind of death. Notable examples of this weapon include the Raven's Talons and, once again, Hunger and Slake. The Raven's Talons were a unique pair of master-crafted lightning claws that were used during the Horus Heresy. Considered a work of art, these jealously guarded weapons were only given to the most honored members of a chapter. As to their fate, it is unknown, but some theories do suggest that they have found a new bearer in the 41st millennium. A departure from the bladed armaments of the power weapon family tree, the Crozius Arcanum is a rod of office carried by the chapter chaplains of the Adeptus Astartes. This weapon is as much a symbol of authority as it is a means of destroying one's foes, and each marine that lays eyes on it knows as much. As chaplains are the ones responsible for maintaining the soul of a chapter, it is important that they are seen leading from the front, with sermons of battle on their lips. This weapon consists of a short staff ending in a broad spiked head, lighting up with a brilliant electrical field. The Crozius produces a localized rending explosion at the site of impact, disintegrating all but the strongest materials. The Thunderhammer, much like the Crozius Arcanum, relies on the rapid expulsion of electric and kinetic force to destroy its targets. The explosion released upon impact is so deafeningly loud that it is often mistaken for a thunderclap, granting it its namesake. Even if an enemy somehow manages to survive the initial impact, internal shock damage caused from the concussion that follows will surely spell their doom. It has been observed that while these unwieldy weapons are notoriously difficult to use defensively, the Storm Warden's chapter of Space Marines have developed a combat style involving pairing a Thunderhammer with a Storm Shield. Many are so fond of the combination that it has become their preferred method of battle. Notable versions of this mighty tool of destruction include the Foehammer, the Fist of Dorn, and Forgebreaker. The Foehammer is an obscure example of a Thunderhammer with an ace up its sleeve. Wielded by the mighty Space Wolf champion Arjak Rockfist, this short-shafted hammer was used to strike down a mighty Eldar Wraith Knight. When Arjak is in need of something to slay his foes at a distance, he looks to no bolter or lascannon, for Foehammer is all he needs, no matter how many times he hurls it at his enemies. Its built-in teleporter ensures that it swiftly returns to his hand to continue its glorious task. The Fist of Dorn is another example of a Thunderhammer of which precious little is known. However, it is theorized that the techniques used in its forging have likely been lost to time, as it has been shown to be able to be completely submerged in volcanic lava, recovered, and used in moments with no issue. Only a weapon of the stalwart Sons of Dorn could be expected to be so durable. Perhaps the most well-known Thunderhammer of all is the mighty Forgebreaker. Forged by the hands of the Primarch Fulgrim and given to his brother Ferrus Manus, it was reclaimed as a trophy by the now traitorous Primarch of the Emperor's Children. Sometime after the Dropsite Massacre, Fulgrim would give the Thunderhammer to Perturabo, who wielded it with terrifying might during the remainder of the Horus Heresy and beyond. At some point during late M41, it was stolen from the Iron Warriors Primarch by the Blood Ravens, who kept it as a relic for a number of years. However, it appears that Perturabo has since retaken his prized weapon and has resumed its use with renewed vitriol. The Power Fist is a grossly oversized augmetic glove that replaces the normal Astartes armored glove. The concussive force produced by this immense weapon is so great that mortals caught in the blast will often burst like an overripe fruit. These massive fists require large amounts of power to activate, and are kept rare by a lack of generators and those with the knowledge to maintain them. Notable examples of this weapon include the Fist of Dragos and the Gauntlets of Ultramar. The Fist of Dragos was a customized power fist with the ability to overcharge itself for excessive electrical and concussive damage. Used by Brother Dragos of the Deathwatch. After every battle, Dragos would visit the chapter forges and beseech the Tech Marines to make modifications to his weapons, hoping to tease out just a little more strength. Due to his extraordinary performance, his requests were granted, eventually. Brother Dragos would meet his end when an overcharged melter gun during a battle with an Orc Dreadnought. His power fist, at least, was recovered intact. The Gauntlets of Ultramar are amongst the most revered relics of the Ultramarines chapter. So durable are their armored shells that no tech priest has been able to examine their interior. Only the chapter master of the Ultramarines may wear these gauntlets, and at all other times they are kept in a case of crystal on Macragge. These massive fists also house built-in bolters that when fired together rival the power of a storm bolter. For the final 2 entries on this long list, we have decided to include perhaps the most relevant power swords in the 41st millennium. The Emperor's Sword is perhaps the power sword in whose image all others are made. Being both a weapon of unique power and a badge of office, the Emperor's Sword is one of the many weapons that the Master of Mankind had at his disposal during his time as humanity's ruler. Said to be exquisitely beautiful in any man's hands, the blade is described by the Custodian Ra Endymion as possessing a blade of silver so hallowed that it was almost blue, and inlaid with impossibly complicated black and copper circuitry. Upon activation, this marvel of engineering bursts into purifying flame that burn not only the body, but the very essence of its victims. Even the soulless Neverborn, the demons of the warp, are not safe from the anathema's blade, for they are granted true death by its killing edge. There is no hope for a second chance for the shards of the Dark Gods once they succumb to this weapon. And in the 42nd millennium, the Emperor's avenging son, Rabute Gilliman, has taken up his father's sword, using it as proof of his right to rule the Imperium in his father's name, and as a fearsome weapon in battle. It has been theorized that the sword of the Emperor may have the ability to grow or shrink to fit the stature of the one using it, as Gilliman was confused as to how it was able to fit him and his father simultaneously. As of the Plague Wars, the Primarch is still at a loss as to how to uncover its secrets, and knows not whether it is an object made by science, warpcraft, or a combination of the two. And finally, when Lionel Johnson awoke from his millennia-long coma, he awoke in a world between worlds. Within, he received from the enigmatic Watchers in the Dark new armor, a new shield, and a new blade. Fealty was the name that the Lion chose for his new armament, for that was what he believed he owed to his father, his brothers, and his sons. Since then, Fealty has never been far from the Lion's hand, always sharp and ready to slay his enemies, be they the endless hordes of Tyranids, corrupted Chaos Sorcerers, or even his damned Primarch brothers. A setting that makes frequent use of archaic weaponry, whilst the devastating power of the future is all but inexhaustible, is a setting that understands themes of honor and glory. But Warhammer 40k reaches deeper than that. It's a setting that understands self-discovery, honed to a razor-sharp edge in the fires of horror and pain. And there are few moments that exemplify this notion of self-discovery through violence and one's tool of violence than when Sigismund becomes a swordsman, as seen in Sigismund, the Eternal Crusader. Sigismund looked around from the wreck. Appius was wiping a saber clean.
Where do they come from?
A good question. These are weapons of the temple, used by its protectors and to train those who would join them. They come from across the stars, unified by the Imperial truth. Some are sent by the great weapon forges of Sol. Others are brought from wars or given by other legions.
What is their purpose? Their true purpose?
To me, their purpose is beauty.
Beauty?
There are few things that I find beautiful. I think that some things are cut from us when we become part of the Legion. Some parts of humanity that are trimmed to allow what remains to have focus. Other legions are different, perhaps. But I find it strange that some are moved by the marks of a brush or the sound of a song. Things wrought for war, the creation of victory, though. That is still somewhere where beauty remains to me.
That is not an answer to the question.
Appius nodded, conceding.
Another purpose is so that you understand each weapon you might face in combat by wielding them yourself. The weapon teaches you how you may defeat it. A Templar must defeat any enemy, so they must wield all weapons.
That is not their ultimate purpose, though, is it?
They teach us who we are. That is why they exist. That is why we must wield them all.
Until we find ourselves?
Until we find our truth.
Appius turned and took a sword off the rack. Razor edges ran down both sides of the straight blade, and a dark leather wound the grip beneath the crossguard. The weapon master raised the sword so that the blade was flat to his face.
When you pick up a tool of war, you should know its history, both as it is written in records and how it is written in its substance. Like you, this blade was made on Terra. A weaponsmith in the Gobinal blade clans of the Asiatic Sinks forged it from shards taken from battlefields while the unity of Terra could still be doubted. Her name is lost, but she was more able than any of those around her. At that time, the blade clans had only just submitted to unity and labored to make the weapons as gifts of fealty to the Emperor. The smith was of a lower caste, unable to work with the purest materials, so she sifted the rust piles and the battle middens for pieces of forged steel that others did not see or discarded because they were too small or too damaged. She gathered carbon dust from the edges of a master's forge spaces. She worked when she should have slept. She made 5 swords, each one different in small ways. Look at this blade, and you can see her in the ripple of the Damascene, in the hammer blows and heat that brought the alloys of so many broken shards together to a single purpose. Her life is in its balance, her truth.
Appius reversed the sword with a smooth spin and held it out, pommel first, to Sigismund.
Try it. The hammer, axe, and gladius are not your tools. Perhaps this will be.
Sigismund took it. He felt the weight of the blade settle into his fingers.
How did it come to the Legion?
When the Blade Clan set their offering of weapons at the feet of the Emperor, he saw the smith's swords buried beneath blades made of pure star steel, of carbon glass and alloys that cannot be replicated even by the High Magi of Mars. All those blades were moved aside, and the smith's blades marveled at. The simplicity of their design, the perfection of their making, and the message they gave outshone all the rest. The Emperor and the Council of Unity gave honor to the masters of the Blade Clans, for gifts that spoke not just of craft, but of understanding. The masters accepted the praise and returned to their forges. The swords were given to officers in the newly founded Legiones Astartes and carried to war. One of them now sits in your hands.
And its maker?
The leaders of the clans burned her alive in her own forge for the shame she had brought on them.
They thought what she had done shameful.
Shameful that she had presumed to place her gifts at the feet of the new Master of Terra. Shameful that her blades had been lauded over their own works. Shameful that she understood something they did not.
What?
Appius gave a smile.
Ask the sword.
Sigismund watched the light pool and shimmer along the waves of the shadow in the steel.
Is that story true?
Appius nodded sadly.
Stories like that always are.
Power weapons have truly carved out a niche for themselves in the grim darkness of the far future. From their versatility to their potency, they truly represent a perfect picture of the old ways meeting the new. Each has a specific purpose and many stories all their own, but in the end, a weapon is still just a tool. To truly become legendary, it must be paired with a warrior worthy of its capabilities. A chosen warrior that takes the time and builds the discipline necessary to master his chosen art of war. Should he stay true to his path? A brutal power axe, a fearsome thunderhammer, or an elegant power sword may be all he needs to transcend from a warrior into a demigod. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to Earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword.